Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. In this lesson, we are going to learn about form number 5, which is called tafa'ala. As we can see, this form has extra letters, and we have ta, which is extra, and then we have again ainul kalima, which has tashdid, which is also extra. So we have 5 letters. We have ta, fa, ain twice, and then lam, tafa'ala. This form is basically when we add ta to form number 2. What is form number 2? Form number 2 is fa'ala, right?
Fa'ala.
Yeah, fa'ala is form number 2. And when we add ta to that, it becomes tafa'ala, and it becomes form number 5. And it's easy to remember that this is basically the reflexive form of form number 2. As we know that in form number 2, a person makes someone do something. It is causative, like allama, that means to teach someone. But when we take it into form number 5 and when we add ta, then it becomes reflexive, where we make ourselves do something. So tafa'ala is basically when we talk about ta'allama, that means to learn. So allama is to teach and ta'allama is to learn. So this is basically reflexive of form number 2. So when we add ta to form number 2, it becomes form number 5. When we look at the pattern, we have over here and tafa'ala, yatafa'alu, tafa'ulan. And please notice over here that now the mudari does not have dhamma. We have seen that in the previous forms, like form number 2, 3, and 4, mudari has dhamma, which is unusual. Whereas normally, starting from form number 1 up to the forms that we have around 10 or 14, the mudari always takes fatha. However, we know that form number 2, which is fa'ala yufa'ilu, and form number 3, which is fa'ala yufa'ilu, and form number 4, which is af'ala yuf'ilu, the mudari takes dhamma. However, when we move on to form number 5, then mudari takes fatha, as we can see over here. So this is the pattern, and the verb that we are going to learn on this pattern is tadabbara. Tadabbara yatadabbaru, tadabburan, to reflect. And we have a very beautiful yet powerful verse of the Quran. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Then they do not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? So now we can see over here that not reflecting on the Quran is referred to having locks on the Quran, that the hearts are locked. And we cannot reflect on the Quran unless we understand it. And that's what we are trying to do now. We are trying to understand the Arabic language of the Quran so that we can reflect on it. All right. Characteristics of form number 5. Just like we will focus on one main characteristic, as we discussed in the beginning, that this is reflexive of form number 2. So in verbs of this form, the action relates back to the doer. So the action goes back to the doer. Allama is to teach. And then when you talk about learning something, it is ta'allama, to learn. So when we are teaching someone, basically we are performing action on the other person and we are making someone do something. But when we talk about ta'allama, it's like we are doing, or we are making ourselves do something. So that's why it is called the reflexive of form number 2. Allama, to teach, ta'allama, to learn. The examples from the Quran: Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. The most merciful taught the Quran, as we can see over here. Allama, taught. And then we move on to Surah Al-Baqarah. وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ. They learn. So now we can see here when it is يَتَعَلَّم and the plural is يَتَعَلَّمُونَ, it refers to learning. They learn what harmed them and did not benefit them. So the most important characteristic of form number 5 is it is reflexive of form number 2, and it is basically the person, the doer, the one who is performing the action, is trying to do something by himself or by herself. So it's focused on the doer. We discussed in the beginning about al-fi'l al-mazidu al-thalathiyu, triliteral derived verbs, and we know that there is an increase of a letter or letters, and that's why we call them derived verbs. The 3-letter fa'ala, which is the root letter, is considered, or the root is considered as the first form. So what is the first form? First form is fa'ala. That is the standard form or the regular form or the original form. So it can be fa'ala, as we have nasara. It can be fa'ila, as we have sami'a, and it can be fa'ula, as we have karuma. So ainul kalima can have fatha, or it can have kasra, or it can have dhamma. When we add one letter to the first form, so the addition of one letter, the following forms are derived. So what happened? We added only one letter. So when we talk about form number 2, 3, and 4, which we have already learned, then what happens? There is an addition of one letter to the basic form. So when one extra letter is added to form number 1, it becomes, as we can see here, fa'ala, and on the pattern of fa'ala we have sabbaha. Then we have fa'ala, there is again addition of one letter, and on this pattern we have jahada, and similarly we have af'ala, where we have hamza in the beginning, addition of extra letter, and we have the example of aslama. Okay, so form number 2, 3, and 4. Please remember these 3 forms, that there is an addition of how many letters? There is an addition of only one letter. When we move on to form number 5, now there is an addition of 2 letters. So we moved on to form number 5. So what happened now? There is an addition of 2 letters. What are those 2 letters? We have ta and tashdid, we can say. Ain al-kalima is double, so we can say addition of ta and tashdid. So it has become tafa'ala, and on this pattern we are going to learn tadabbara. Form 1, then we have addition of one letter, and it becomes form 2, 3, and 4. And when we have addition of 2 letters, we have form 5 and also form 6. These 2 forms will have only 2 extra letters. And when we move on to form number 8, 9, and 10, there will be an addition of 3 extra letters. So now it's getting like bigger, and it's getting like, mashallah, like you are getting advanced. So we started with form number 1, then we moved on to 2, 3, 4, and now we are moving on to form number 5. How to remember them? In book number 2, I remember we started and then we couldn't continue because we completed only up to form number 6, because we started book number 3, and now we continue with the same pattern. And we will just add on only one thing over here. You can see that form number 1 is red over here, and why it is red? Because it is not derived. It is the regular form. It is not derived. So we have form number 1, fa'ala. Then it is regular or reflexive. Reflexive means that when we do something by ourselves, right? Fa'ala, he did something, so it is reflexive. Daraba, samia, all of them are reflexive. Or we can say regular. Then we have form number 2, so we need to remember 2 things. Number 1, we need to remember the forms. And number 2, at least we need to remember at least 1 or 2 characteristics, so that we don't only cram or memorize the forms only, we also know the meaning. So fa'ala is regular and it is reflexive. Then we have number 2, which is fa'ala. On this pattern we have sabbaha, and we know that sabbaha is causative and it is intensive. So not sabbaha, I mean form number 2 is causative. For example, nazala, he came down, and nazzala, he brought down. And also it is intensive, like qatala and qattala. We have learned like 4 or 5 characteristics, but these are 2 main characteristics of form number 2. Then we move on to form number 3, which is jahada, which is basically fa'ala, and on this pattern we have jahada, and we know that this is reciprocal, where there are 2 persons involved, one normally being active and the other being passive. However, Both of them can be active and both of them can be passive. It involves two persons or two groups. That's why we say it is reciprocal. And then we have form number 4, aslama, which is basically af'ala. It is causative. So we can see that 2 and 4 are causative. However, it is intensive as well. So this is something extra. And the rest we can see that form number 3 is reciprocal, and 2 and 4, they have similar kind of characteristics. And then we move on to form number 5, tadabbara. And as we have seen that this is reflexive of form number 2. Now how to memorize? Very simple. We have only one formula over here, that doing tasbih and mujahada are from the basics of Islam. Sabbaha, jahada, aslama. So of course we will start from fa'ala so that we also remember form number 1. So we will say fa'ala, sabbaha, jahada, aslama. Doing tasbih and mujahada are from the basics of Islam. Fa'ala, sabbaha, jahada, aslama. If we do tadabbur, and then we have form number 5, tadabbara, and inshallah when we move on, we will also continue our formula as well. So as of now, if you want to take a picture, you can take a picture of this. If you want to write it down, and please try to memorize like this. Doing tasbih and mujahada are from the basics of Islam. Fa'ala, sabbaha, jahada, aslama. If we do tadabbur, tadabbara, and then we will continue. Now you have these 5 forms on your fingertips, as you can see here. So if we look at form number 1, which is fa'ala, this is the smallest form, so we will refer it to the smallest finger, as we can see over here, the tiniest of the fingers. So you can have the forms on your fingertips now. You can just open your fingers in front of your eyes now, and you can see that your lady finger or the small finger is form number 1. Okay, that is fa'ala. Then when we move on to form number 2, we increase one letter. So once we increase one letter, it becomes form number 2. So it becomes sabbaha, fa'ala, sabbaha. And we can see that the third finger, which is the longest over here, and also the extra letter is also longest. Alif is very long, so that we can refer it to that. So we can say that form number 3 is jahada. And when we move on to the 4th finger, which is the index finger, this is aslama. And you know that what is unique about it? That this is the only form which has hamza, and this hamza is hamzatul qati'. What does that mean? Hamzatul qati' means whenever we write it or whenever we speak, we do not drop it. So for example, aslama yuslimu islaman. So whenever we talk about aslama or Islam, we will not drop hamza, it will be pronounced. And similarly, when we make fi'l amr, the hamza will not be dropped. So this is something special about form number 5 and form number 4, and form number 5, as we can see over here. When we continue 1, 2, 3, 4, and form number 5, how many letters does it have? 5 letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it is easy to remember that form number 5 has 5 letters. So that's why we say this is form number 5. Now you have these 5 forms on your fingertips. Fa'ala, sabbaha, jahada, aslama, and tadabbara. Why it's important to remember and memorize? Because they, as we have seen, they occur a lot in the Quran, and also these forms, like when we learn the Arabic language, they have different functions. So we need to know like why form number 2 has been used, or 3 or 4 has been used, whether it is like modern standard Arabic or it is the Quran. Alright, so we have tadabbara, yatadabbaru, tadabburan. One more thing that we need to notice over here, that all the forms, so far all the forms do not have kasra. Tadabbara does not have kasra, yatadabbaru does not have kasra, and tadabburan does not have kasra. So when we make fi'l al-amr, do you remember how to make fi'l al-amr?
Yes, Ustad. The last letter should be
From mudari. Yeah, when we talk about, especially when we talk about the second person. So basically we have tatadabbaru. Yeah. So what we do, we make the ending sakin, and we drop alamat al-mudari. Yeah. And if it is readable, if it's okay to pronounce, then there is no need to make any change. So tadabbur is easy to pronounce, that's why it is ready. So fi'l al-amr will be tadabbur. Similarly, ta'allam, takallam, tahaddath, right? So all of them, and we can see that there is no kasra so far. Similarly, fi'lu nahi, easy to remember. In fi'lu nahi, we only make the ending sakin, as we can see over here. So it was tatadabbaru, and when we add la and nahiya, then the ending becomes sakin. One more thing that we need to remember, which is about this form, that whenever we have ta'an or two ta'as together, in this case we can see over here, tatadabbaru, normally what happens? One ta gets dropped. So as it is difficult to pronounce tata, so what happens? The Arabs normally what they do, if it's difficult something to pronounce, they normally drop it. So it will be tadabbar, la tadabbar. So instead of tatadabbar, it will be la tadabbar. It's possible. It's not obligatory, but it's possible that sometimes when we have ta'an, two ta'as together, one of them gets dropped. Ismul fa'il, as we know that in the beginning we always add mu, as we can see over here. So when we add mu to mudare, and after that we have ta. In this case we have ya, but we have ta, so it will be muta and dabbir, and in the end we will put tanween. However, it has to have kasra, mutadabbir. So in all the derived forms, ismul fa'il and ismul maf'ul will be mu. All of them will have dhamma, mim and dhamma, mu, all of them. Like we have learned, like mufa'il, we have learned Muhammad, Muhammad, right? And similarly, muf'il, Muslim, and we have learned forms. So all of them have dhamma. So ismul fa'il always takes kasra. The second last letter takes kasra. And ismul maf'ul, what happens? The second last letter takes fatha. Yeah. And it is applicable to all the forms, derived forms, starting from form number 2 up to form number 10. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that in this bab there is no kasra in past. Past does not have kasra, present does not have kasra. Masdar, as we can see here, tadabburan does not have kasra. Command and fi'l nahi or prohibition, they do not have kasra. So there is only one kasra so far. Where is kasra? Can you figure out?
Ismul fa'il.
Ismul fa'il, ahsanti. Yes, in ismul fa'il there is kasra. But normally this form does not have kasra. الصرف الصغير, so we have تدبر يتدبر تدبرا فهو متدبر. And why we always have this? It's for you to memorize. فهو متدبر, اسم الفاعل. And when we have passive, it will be تدبر. Now, because there is an addition of extra two letters, that's why all the letters that are extra, or the first letter will take, as we know that the first letter always takes dhamma when we take for passive. So basically passive will be on the pattern of fu'ila. It is always fu'ila, but here we have the addition of ta, so it becomes tufu'ila, right? So it becomes tufu'ila. That's why it is tudubbira. Tudubbira, and the present will be yutadabbaru, as we know that the present also takes dhamma when we talk about passive, yutadabbaru, and the masdar is tadabburan, and fadhaka mutadabbarun, as we can see here. This is ismul maf'ul, mutadabbarun. Tadabbar is fi'lul amr. La tatadabbar, basically it should be la tadabbar or la tatadabbar. Both of them are possible. It is fi'lul nahi, and mutadabbarun can be dharf zaman aw makan if needed. So we have discussed that whenever we need dharf zaman or makan, basically in the derived forms, the ismul maf'ul performs the function of dharf zaman or makan. Like we have learned mudkhal, mukhraj, we have learned these ones. So from number 4, and similarly now from number 5, we will have the ismul maf'ul will do the job of dharf zaman or makan, which is different from the verbs that have 3 root letters. You know that in 3 root letters we have the pattern of maf'alun or maf'ilun, right? But here we don't have to have a new pattern. We will only take ismul maf'ul and we will use it as dharf zaman aw makan if needed. Now as we can see, the number is increasing, so we have moved on to form number 5. So tafa'ala, ta and ain al kalima are extra. Tafa'ala yatafa'alu, Tafa'al is fi'l al-amr, masdar is tafa'ul, and ismul fa'il is mutafa'il, and ismul maf'ul is mutafa'al. So why we have these again and again? So that we can memorize them and we can remember them. More examples. So we have dhakara, means he mentioned, right? And tadhakkara, he remembered. So what happened now? He mentioned, and when it came to form number 5, it became tadhakkara, he remembered, which is reflexive, and he remembered something by himself. If you make someone remember something, we use form number 4. What is form number 4? It will be dhakkara. Dhakkara, to make someone remember, yani remind. Dhakkara yudhakkiru tadhkiran, that means to remind. But when we talk about tadhakkara, that means to remember. So extra ta means reflexive. So you can remember like this. Extra ta means that when you are doing something by yourself. Wala yali, as we know, he followed, and tawalla, he turned back. Sometimes the meaning can be completely different. Wakala, he entrusted, and tawakkala, he put his trust, especially with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One characteristic which we did not mention in detail, which you only need to remember, is that from number 5, can something have passive meaning? The meaning will be passive in itself. For example, bana, it became clear, and tabayyana, it became clear. So when something becomes clear, it becomes clear by itself. There is no one to make it clear, because if there is someone to make it clear, that will be from number 4. That will be bayyana. Bayyana yubayyinu tabyinan. But when we say tabayyana, something became clear, so it means that something became clear by itself. So that's why we have to remember that this form can be sometimes passive as well. So it gives the meaning of what? Passive. And we will learn from one form. There is a complete form which is infa'ala, which only gives the meaning of passive. So this is a small highlight over here, that sometimes it can give the meaning of passive as well. Similarly, fakara, he reflected or he meditated, and tafakkara, he meditated or reflective, is also passive. He did something by himself. And kalama, we have learned in form number 2, he injured, and takallama, he spoke. That means to speak, or he spoke. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.